Hello! In today's video, we're going to be making some delicious mini fruit pies, and the crust is similar to that of a tart crust. And I'll also be using fresh milled flour with hard red wheat. You can find the ingredients in the description box below, as well as other links to the tools that I'll be using in this video or similar ones, especially the grain mill. Hello and welcome to our channel, and if you're new, please consider subscribing and sharing this video. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to get the motor going before adding the grains, and I'll be using about 6 cups of grains because I'll be using this flour in several other recipes. But a little rule of thumb is 1 cup of grains will yield almost a cup and a half of fresh milled flour. This particular mill has 3 settings: a very fine one for pastry, a middle one for bread, and a coarse one in case you want to make things like grits. I used the bread setting. 3 cups of fresh milled flour, and I am not sifting it. I like to use entire grain. It has a lot of nutrition. Next, I'll add 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, and I preferred to use cane sugar, and a gentle whisk to mix all that together before the next step. In this recipe, I'll be using salted butter, but if you prefer unsalted butter, please add half a teaspoon of salt. The process is going to be very similar to when you prepare a pie crust. I have about a cup of water, and I'm going to be adding ice to make it cold and chilled. I have here very cold butter, and I prefer salted butter. I'm using 2 sticks, which is about 16 tablespoons or about 8 ounces. I'm going to dice the butter into very small pieces, something close to about a 1/4 inch. And now it's time to add the butter to the flour bowl. For the next step, I'll be using a pastry blender. This can take between 4 to 5 minutes until you get piece-size consistency. It's perfectly okay to have some pieces bigger than others. I personally prefer it that way, and that is going to help it get flaky and crusty. And this is the cold water. I'll be using about 8 tablespoons. I like to add 2 tablespoons at a time and then mix it with the pastry blender. At one point, I like to mix it gently with my hand to ensure that there is no loose or dry flour at the bottom of the bowl. You will notice that the dough begins to form clumps, and that is what we're looking for. At this point, I'm going to give it one last gentle mix with my hands. The dough will still be somewhat loose, but when you press it with your fingers, it sticks together. And now I'm going to dump it onto my countertop. And at this time, I'm going to gather all of the clumps and stick them together. I like to give it a few folds before I form the final disc. Now I'm going to give it a round shape. And finally, I'm going to wrap it in plastic before I store it in the fridge. If you're going to be making this recipe the same day, I recommend you store it in the fridge for about 45 minutes to an hour. It also depends on how cold is the temperature in your refrigerator. And if you're going to place it in the refrigerator overnight, just remove it from the fridge and leave it at room temperature for at least 30 minutes before you start shaping it. Otherwise, it's going to be really tough and hard to roll. In the meantime, I'm going to prepare a cookie tray, and this is a really large one. Depending on the size of your cookie tray, you might need to bake it in several batches. Now I'm going to line it with parchment paper. My dough has been in the refrigerator for almost an hour. It's time to unwrap it and start rolling it. I'm lightly dusting the countertop with the same flour. I find it easier to cut it in half and work with half of the dough at a time. And I'll be folding it in half about 3 to 4 times. This is going to help the dough be a little flaky after baking. I like to start with the shape of a disc. Now I'll roll it from the center towards the end a few times before rotating the dough. If it gets too sticky, you can always add a little bit of flour to the rolling pin. And instead of dusting the entire dough with the flour, I rather keep the flour on the countertop and on the edge and dust it as I need it. I'm going to keep rolling it until it is approximately 1/8 of an inch thick, maybe slightly thinner. At one point, it might be a little bit difficult to rotate the dough without breaking it. So at this time, it's better to rotate the rolling pin slightly instead of the dough. This is a round cookie cutter and it's almost 5 inches in diameter. Please know that the size of your mini pie will depend on the size of the cookie cutter. If you make it too small, it's going to be a little bit difficult to handle it. We will save and use the scraps to continue shaping more mini pies. And we will process them as we shape them. This is a homemade blackberry jam, and I'm going to be leaving the link in the description box below to my video on how you can make a delicious blackberry jam with only 2 ingredients. And I'm going to be using only a teaspoon for each of the little pies. If you use more than a teaspoon, it could make it a little bit harder to fold each of those discs to form the little pies. And also, the jam could burst out during the baking process. I have about 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And I'll be using a silicone pastry brush to paint it on the edge of each of the discs. And then I'm going to fold each in half and press them firmly on the edge. This is to ensure that they are completely sealed. And now I'm going to transfer them to the cookie tray. I'll repeat the process with the next batch. I'll be putting together the leftover scraps with the other half of the dough. And as you can see, I'm repeating the process again. After folding it in half about 3 to 4 times, I'm going to turn it into a disc and then roll it with the rolling pin. And again, I want to obtain a thickness of about 1/8 of an inch. The final amount of mini pies depends on the size of the cookie cutter that you decide to use. The bigger, the better and easier to fold. And we will keep saving the scraps for the next batch. And now I'm brushing them with the melted butter. And it's time to transfer them to the cookie tray. As the dough gets smaller and smaller, you might notice that it might be a little bit difficult to work with, but not impossible. Just ensure that you don't make it too thin. And since I don't like to throw away anything, I'm going to turn this piece into one single mini pie. And since they are not going to expand, I'm going to create more space. You can have between 1/2 an inch to 3/4 of an inch in between each one of them. Now I'm going to preheat the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. In the meantime, we're going to do the final steps. The next step is optional. I'll be using a fork to not only decorate them, but to ensure that they are properly sealed. But you don't need to use a fork. You can also use your fingers. Just go around them one more time and press them gently to ensure a complete seal. One of the final steps is to make a simple egg wash. And I'll be using the pastry brush to paint the egg over the patties. I like to sprinkle them with a little bit of granulated sugar, and I prefer to use cane sugar. And finally, we need to create some vents. I'm using a knife to do 3 little slits on each of the pies. If we forget to do the vent, the jam may try to escape and burst out of the pie. And finally into the oven. We will bake them for a total of 25 to 30 minutes. 5 minutes of those will be at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then after 5 minutes, we will reduce the temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit without opening the oven door. They will continue baking at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for the remaining 20 to 25 minutes. And after about 28 minutes, my mini pies are done. I'll wait about 5 minutes before transferring them to a cooling rack. Please wait until they cool down completely before consuming. They will still be a little bit brittle and the jam extremely hot. And after about an hour, this is the result. They are so exquisite and delicate, super delicious. And the crust is very nice and flaky and delicately crunchy. They also have a unique nutty flavor from the fresh milled flour. And please know that you can use any jam of your preference. I just decided to use my own homemade blackberry jam. And there you have it. Thank you very much for watching this video. And if you wish, please consider subscribing and sharing this video. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful and super blessed day.